Hello and welcome to episode 88 of Fan Fuel Motorsports Podcast. I am Alex Harrington, back after being sick for about a week. And you guys saw a really good show last week with our favorite race donkey, Matt Yost, and of course our other host, Colton Cranmore, talking all about the Chili Bowl and everything that happened in Tulsa. But this week we've got a massive show, and we've got a super fan of IMSA coming on and Kyle Hall. So we're going to do a fan spotlight today, and we're also going to run down everything you need to know about the Rolex. But before that, we'll get into our new segment, Splash and Dash. And this week's Splash and Dash is going to start with Supercross. Round 2 was dominated by Eli Tomac yet again out in San Diego, and Malcolm Stewart actually had a really good weekend until the final race. He won pole as well as dominating his heat, but crashed out early in the main event. Everything was pretty procedural out in San Diego with that very technical track. Not a lot of really good passing, but there was some decent racing towards the end of the main. Moving on to iRacing, having the virtual 24 hours of Daytona this weekend. It was kind of a big FU to Motorsports Games, who, if you didn't catch up with the virtual Le Mans stuff, it was basically a massive failure for a very professional motorsport esport race. They wound up having 85 splits with over 2,000 drivers running simultaneously, while Motorsports Games couldn't run off the Le Mans virtual by itself. And you saw Max Verstappen's meltdown. Well, we had meltdowns too. Fan Fuel Motorsports esports teams qualified 30th and finished 27th in their first endurance race. However, they pushed through all 24 hours despite being in the garage for over 4 hours after a ride height issue on our car plagued every single one of us going into the bus stop on cold tires. We backed her in multiple times. We'll talk about that crash a little bit later because it happened in real life this past weekend. But it was a strong run-in for the four of us, myself, Matt Yost, the guy that was on last week, Terry Freer, and Shane Gentry. And with that, the intro music is over, and we only have one more thing to talk about, and that's the NASCAR text at Phoenix. But our guest, Kyle Hall, wants to come in and join us for that. So, Kyle, welcome in. We're really glad to have you here on Fan Fuel Motorsports. And
thanks for having me.
Thankful that you came on. So,
thanks for having me, Alex. Glad to be here. It's great.
We were talking before we started recording the show, and you wanted to hop in on this Phoenix test. You actually provided me with a lot more information than I had because I got off work at 8 this morning, so I woke up around 5 and didn't know what was going on in Phoenix. All I knew was there was a 2.5-inch spoiler on the back of those cars. A lot going on in Phoenix. What are you excited about?
Yeah, it looked like Jimmy Johnson was even out there in his new ride, that Legacy Motorsports Club ride, and he had assistance by his buddy Casey Mears. So anxious to see. That might have been his first time in the new car, the next gen. So, and another rumor that came out of Phoenix was that they were actually testing some style of mufflers to have the cars tuned sound a little differently coming up. So Bob Pockrass even commented on his Twitter that he was looking to get a recording of that to show the viewers how different it was from last year. I'm not sure where they plan on running it if they do, but it'd be pretty neat to see what happens to that.
So from what I've seen, it looks like they've moved the exhaust back a little bit, which I think is another safety thing that they've done to the car.
Yeah, with the fires.
You know that they did the rear clip. They redesigned it basically to have a little more give after the Kurt incident and everything. And all the drivers complaining about intros trying to play over again. Sorry about that. And all the drivers complaining about heat coming up through their seats and everything with the way that the exhaust was. So it seems like they moved that back. So I don't know if that made them a little bit louder. And considering that they're racing in a city this year in Chicago, and then
that was mentioned in the comments about the muffler. Yeah.
The Clash being in LA, it might just be something where noise regulations. Maybe LA wasn't happy last year with
I think it was on more to the Chicago road course, Alex. You bring that up. That's one of they're perhaps under a noise ordinance in the big city, but we're going to find out some more information real soon about that muffler. And yeah, whatever happens out of the test coming out in Phoenix with that new car coming out with Jimmy and the whole 9 yards coming up.
Yeah, I'm wondering, since it's not a super speedway test, if that means that 84 is going to be on track more than just for the Daytona 500 this year.
Yeah, hopefully. I don't. They run all the big races too, so I like to see Jimmy. I'm anxious to see how he does in the 500. Looks like he's going to be running as a open car, an open team.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to fight for a spot in the duels. And as of now, they're still waiting on a few entries for Elio Castroneves. And if he lands a ride for the 500, it looks like we got 41 confirmed cars for the 500. Jimmy's one of them.
Yeah.
So five on
And
five.
you could say that traditionalists would want to have the 43 cars back. I could say that as well.
Yeah.
But also having one car go home because of the duels, that sounds a little fun.
It is fun. And I always look back to the old duels where it was a real serious event on a Thursday afternoon where you had a good 8 or 9, 10 cars go home that night for the 500. I'm curious to see if we ever get back to those days, because I am a traditionalist like that, and those are some of the funnest races of the year to watch.
Yeah, I'm thinking with the platform, the longer we get into it, it's not going to change that much, I doubt. Over the next 10 so years, customer cars might actually start coming out, and we could see smaller teams going for these big events.
That's cool.
I'd love to see the Daytona 500, all the super speedways, of course, with guys going home, and then of course your big races at Charlotte with the 600 and the Southern 500. But hey, it seems like motorsports is in a new golden age. So, and we'll talk about some of that a little bit later. But before that, we always like to bring on fans and spotlight them. So whereas, you would watch or listen to the Dale Jr. Download and have Bobby Labonte or someone on there that you might not know as a newer fan come in and learn about the history of the sport through them. Well, fans are what make the sport what it is. So what we do here at Fan Fuel is we focus on you as a fan and how your experiences have changed your fandom over the years and stuff like that. We also kind of want to say, okay, well, who is this Kyle Hall guy? Why is he important? What does it matter the rest of the show what his opinion is? Well, you are a well-versed racing fan and you've been here for a while. So let's go ahead and start from the beginning.
Sure.
I'm gonna ask you the hardest question I ask everybody on this show, no matter if it's a fan or an industry member. Who is Kyle Hall?
Yeah, I grew up in Daytona, so I'm still here actually in Volusia County. And we were just at the track this past weekend. But yeah, I've lived here my whole life as a young boy. Some of the first memories I've had is actually been at Daytona Speedway on my dad's shoulders, watching the race. I'm pretty confident it was the 92 500 was the first one I attended. Davey Allison won, became my favorite driver, and the rest is history. We trying to go to all the local tracks here, New Smyrna Speedway, also Barberville, which was a paved quarter mile at one point of its history. Now it's dirt, known as Volusia Speedway. So they actually used to have Goodies Dash Series races there. And I'd venture out there in the cold months and watch some night racing, which is really neat in the early days. But yeah, so that's the racing's kind of what drives me and keeps me motivated. And we also run a family-oriented powder coating business here in Daytona, my dad and I, and that keeps us real busy throughout the week. And we have a lot of customers getting their wheels recoated, refinished, and also a big event here in Daytona is Bike Week. So we have a lot of motorcycle shops in town that do custom Harleys, custom choppers, and we'll take care of their needs. And a lot of the motorcycle owners, they would get the chrome, black it out, and luckily for us, our small business is able to help with that. So that keeps us going. We also get some neat clientele based on being so close to the speedway. This past week, we had a Porsche team reach out to us and needed us to sandblast 14 brake rotors in a hurry that were still in the transporter on the way down to Daytona. That's how much of a scramble they were in. And last year we powder coated a fuel tank red for Jacques Villeneuve's team. So
Okay.
that was pretty cool with us. But every year, I always make it since 2004. I've been to every Rolex, haven't missed one. Camped out in the infield all weekend for the IMSA series, the Rolex 24 Hours, their season opener, and I just try to enjoy it as much as we can. Stay up the entire race in some cases, and it's a cold one out there, Alex. I know you've been to one or two of them.
Yeah. So you just dumped a bunch of information. So we're gonna have to break most of those down in parts.
Yes.
So you're in Florida. I told you this before we got on. I feel like it's the motorsports capital of the United States because you've got every single series has at least one major event in Florida.
Yeah.
And um, most people, when they think Florida, they only think beaches, they think theme parks, whatever. But it's really a motorsports theme park, the entire state as well.
It
So,
is.
were you into racing just because you were in Daytona, or how far back does racing go in your family ties?
Not far back in mine, Alex. That's a good question. My grandfather that I mentioned earlier, my dad, they're really not too interested in racing.
Okay.
Even though I credit my dad for taking me to the NASCAR track, the Daytona Speedway, for my first race. But yeah, I mean, after that, I've just been hooked. I've just been hooked, and it's been great having the tracks, New Smyrna Speedway, Daytona so close, Volusia Speedway. Even Sebring. I've made a few Sebring 12-hour events, and they're famous for the weather. They're famous for a lot of the winter testing, Indy cars, IMSA. There's even been some next gen tests in there this past winter, and they're active 365 days a year, Sebring Raceway. And we of course you got the Gator Nationals,
Yeah.
the NHRA in Gainesville, Homestead Miami Speedway down in Miami. That they're always had the championship weekend for Ford, which was awesome, and even of course you got our Daytona Super Speedway, which almost ended up down in Miami. If you look at the history of Daytona, they were targeting Fort Lauderdale or Daytona as the site to build the Daytona National Speedway. Mr. Moneypenny was the gentleman that designed the track, so it could have easily been down in Fort Lauderdale. But
Hmm.
my family ended up here in Daytona, and just being in the proximity of the racetrack is what attracted me to the Speedway. And yeah, going at a young age, those NASCAR cars, the way they looked, the sponsors on them, and as a young boy, I was able to put that together to the diecast cars I collected also. So what kept me going is that the paint scheme stayed the same. You would see the same car on TV as you did those racing champions back in 92 and 93. So that made it a lot easier for myself to latch on, so to say.
Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. So I do have to say, you've probably been to way more races than I have, certainly, especially when it comes to the types of racing.
Yeah,
What is your favorite form of racing live, and what's your favorite memory live?
good question, Alex. Yeah, favorite. Well, NASCAR is always going to be my first love. I'm always going to go to NASCAR. Yeah, my favorite memory, my favorite memory of racing, that a race that I've been to.
Yep.
Wow. I would say it would have to be in '01, 3 days before Dale Sr. died, the Friday IROC race. I was there.
Okay.
Um, and I want to say it was Eddie Cheever that got into it with Dale Sr. and ran Senior off the road in turn one. And I was right there in front of me. And I remember seeing the dirt go up, and somehow Senior saved it. And of course, I'm wearing a Dale Senior shirt right now. No coincidence. But I tell you, that day, I was 2 days before his death, and one of the defining moments of his career, and that little altercation he had with Eddie Cheever. And of course, after the race, everybody thought that Cena was going to wring Cheever's neck as he headed right towards his IROC car, and ended up giving him a friendly Earnhardt gesture. So that has to be in person. That has to be one that stands out. And it seemed like nobody was there that day. It was a Friday. There was two races, the IROC race and the Goodies Dash series. So it was a light day in speed weeks, but yeah, the IROC race stands out a lot.
Okay. I'll have to go back and watch that. I don't think
Oh,
I've
oh
actually
one.
seen that
Yep.
race.
He was
Yeah.
in a green Firebird. Dale Senior was.
Okay. Yeah,
It
I'll
was
have
in
to go back and watch
2001.
that.
Yep.
IROC was on its way out when I
It
was
was.
watching, so I never really watched too many of them. I have gone back and seen some of the ones, especially from like '80s when they were at like Michigan and stuff, and they'd be passing each other into the corner and out of the corner, and that was
Mm-hmm.
wild. But yeah, I'll have to go watch that race. That's probably a good homework assignment for everybody watching as
But
well.
that 92 Daytona 500 was my first race, and it was in the infield. And I vividly remember, as 5 years old, I must have been, Michael Waltrip crashing right in front of me in the number 30 Pennzoil car. And all my life, I kind of carried that moment with me, that memory. Man, that 30 Pennzoil car, sure enough, the days of YouTube roll around, I was able to locate that race, and I was able to because I couldn't remember where on the track I was. And it was in turns 3 and 4 that wreck happened. And I remember Waltrip's car coming to a rest kind of right in front of me in the infield. And I was on my dad's shoulders watching that. And I was able to decades later, connect the dots on YouTube. It was actually Michael Waltrip in that crash in 92 500.
You've probably seen so much cool shit.
Yeah, that was cool. And the fact
Man.
that I was able to go back years later was even cooler, and see that clip. And it's totally different if you look at some of those old races on YouTube. If some of you or your viewers get a chance to, just the way everything of the whole race, just watching the driver get out of the car. Go on YouTube and watch Dale Senior get out of the car in the '93 Pepsi 400 after he won it. It's just you don't see it like it is nowadays. It's just different. No complaints on my end. It's just different.
Yeah. So you've actually been able to see a lot of different motorsports develop as well, just being in Daytona.
Yeah.
IMSA was not the really sports car conglomerate that it is now, just 10 years ago before it and ALMS merged. So kind of going more towards the Rolex stuff, did you go to any well, you said you've been to the Rolex since 2004.
Yep.
When it was the Grand Am series,
Yeah.
Did you find those events more fun than what we see now today?
I think I would say that they're more fun now than they were back in 03, 04. In fact, I went to one Rolex with a good friend of mine by ourselves. I think it must have been the one when the Racers Group Porsche won overall. That had to have been 03. That was my first Rolex in person. And growing up in Daytona, I recall driving past the Speedway in 96, 97, 98 and hearing the cars, and just was fascinated with the fact that those cars were running for 24 hours. I just couldn't get it through my mind that they weren't shutting off. Those cars were not, the engines were not turning off for 24 hours and being run. I just could not get that, get that through my head. And I remember, I couldn't believe it. I remember living in my old neighborhood in Daytona, going outside in the middle of the night in the cold, and just to hear the cars. Yep, it's late at night. Sure enough, they're still running 24 hours. I remember going outside and checking to see, making sure I could hear the cars. And you could hear the cars at all hours at the Rolex 24 hour at night. So I would say, to answer your question, Alex, nowadays is a lot more fun. Not taken back from those early days, because they were very fun. But I mean, just as for motorsports, IMSA, you get to see a lot. I mean, just this past weekend at the Roar, even the brand new cars, the hybrids, the hypercars, the LMDHs, they have a warning sign around them with the high voltage of the hybrid system. So that's something new this year that we haven't seen. That was pretty cool. But yeah, the Rolex is known for its harsh weather. Even though we're here in Daytona, it's the last week of January. It's generally our coldest week of the year.
Yeah.
And we've seen Canadians cold down here in Daytona during that weekend. And it's just a brutal cold. It could get down to, last year it got down to like 28. We were camping in the infield. And you underestimate how cold it gets. So it's a brutal race. And like you said, with the history of it, it started when I was going. The Daytona prototypes were just now getting started, and watching those I got interested in Le Mans and ALMS in 2007, 2008. And I ended up branching off from Grand Am and going to my first ALMS race, Le Mans prototype race at Petit Le Mans. And one of the drawing factors of that was that Peugeot. They ran a single Peugeot 908 HDIFAP LMP1 car at the Petit Le Mans that year. And I was determined to drive up. It was an 8-hour drive, but I made that drive to Atlanta and slept in the back of my little Dodge Dakota in a cold October Georgia morning and got up
Yeah.
and saw a warm up, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Audi V10s, turbo diesels, and that Peugeot, along with Lola V8s, Lola Judge, single turbos. I mean, every car had a different music note,
That
and
was
it's beautiful.
that was the really, I guess, defining years of sports car racing prior to where we are now in 2023. I remember that's when I got into it, watching Le Mans on TV with the Audi TDIs were something just crazy to me.
They were.
And then, like you said, the Peugeot, that was the first time that they put cockpits on the LMP cars. Right?
Yes. They were open cockpit. So they had an option to. They had an option to build a closed or an open cockpit car at that time.
Yeah, and so seeing everything from then and now, I mean, we're going slower, a lot slower now than those cars. But like you said, I feel like the racing is just better now than it has ever been. So that's pretty neat. So I guess let's continue this Daytona trend.
Sure.
That's where you are. I talked about Supercross a little bit earlier. You guys have Bike Week every year.
Right, and that Supercross event's right in the middle of Bike Week, and we can latch on, like we were saying, that's their biggest event, till I understand, is Supercross at Daytona. You want to win that event, just like you want to win the Daytona 500, the Rolex 24-hour, Kart Week. If you look into Kart Week in December here in Daytona, their biggest event is that Kart Week National Championship weekend. So, yeah, Supercross, Eli Tomac and those guys. Chad Reed one year in the rain got stuck, and it was a pouring rain race. Yeah, there's some legendary races that come out of that Daytona Supercross.
Yeah. So how is Bike Week? I've heard a lot of people for Panama City Bike Week talk about how much of a nuisance this is, just like for them spring break is with college kids and stuff. Is that how you feel? Obviously, you get business from it being in the powder cut stuff.
Yeah.
But as a resident, does it annoy you having all those bikes there for basically 2 weeks long?
We've had mayors of Daytona. I mean, it's an ongoing topic, Alex. In the 90s and early 2000s, there was definitely a rumble around town. There were so many Harleys in town. It was unbelievable. I will say that it's more spread out nowadays. It's more, if it's the same amount of people in town, you wouldn't tell by looking. They're more spread out. There's some areas that aren't as popular as others for gathering places, bars. But man, Daytona Bike Week, I've been every year. It's the second weekend in March, and the residents here have had a love-hate relationship with the bikers, because you got your business owners where it attracts business to, such as myself. Then you've got some people that are looking to retire that don't like the noise. It is very loud, and they complain. So we've even had mayors come in and campaign on quieting the riders for Bike Week. And suddenly you would see signs, "Ride quietly, please," around town that would pop up right before a certain Bike Week. So yeah, the residents here have a love-hate relationship with the bikers, but I want to change it for anything in the world. It's a great Daytona tradition. It's going to continue for years to come. 2 weekends. There's traditions all over the place with Bike Week. They do a burning bike where they literally build a wooden skeleton riding a Harley, big as you can imagine, bigger than 3-4 Greyhound buses. And the last Saturday of Bike Week, they draw it out to a field in DeLand, Florida, and they light the thing on fire. And it's a tradition. It's going for about 6 or 7 years now. So that's cool to see new traditions come into a festival such as Bike Week that's been here for 70 some years. Such as that burning bike event. And yeah, they're spread. They've built Rossmeyer Destination Daytona. That's Ormond Beach. They've attracted them more out there. They've eliminated some of the main attraction down Beach Street in Daytona. So there's really not much going on in Beach Street. They used to have a lot of vendors and so on and so forth. They still have the traditional Cabbage Patch. That's known world famous for their coleslaw wrestling. I've never been to that, as much as I hate to say it. I've never been to the coleslaw wrestling at the Cabbage Patch, but you know, and New Smyrna's got some great attractions too for Bike Week. And yeah, you've even talked to some of the bikers that come down. They go to Orlando, they go to Tampa, they go to Gainesville, they go to St. Augustine while they're here. So you'll see them around the whole state.
Yeah, well, that's tourism is Florida's biggest, economic gain that they have. So I understand when people come into somewhere and they're living somewhere and they don't want to be bothered, but it bothers me more that people come into places, particularly around our short tracks here, in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and then they complain that they moved by a racetrack and there's noise on Saturday night. Well, if you move to Daytona, there's spring break and there's Bike Week every year. You can't get mad because you moved somewhere where there's going to be people certain times of the year.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah, it's frustrating. I'm sure.
And as time goes on, yeah, you've heard the airport complaints, haven't we? I mean, we have heard those here too. So, yeah, Alex. So hopefully, it's been smooth the past 3 years, but the crowd definitely takes it down to a whole new level.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've gotten through pretty much most of the disciplines of racing.
Yes, sir.
I do want to get into more of you. As race fans, we tend to have problems, and that is we like to spend money doing different hobbies that align with racing.
Yes.
Whether that's racing in a big car, ourselves, collecting diecast, collecting memorabilia, or just simply going and camping out at races. Our pockets are always burning because our wallets are ready to be spending money. What did you spend your money on as a fan? Now, I know you've got some hobbies that I know, but, how did you get into some stuff and how we got connected through my dad? I'll let you start with that.
Right, Alex. Yeah, so slot car racing has been a long time hobby of mine. There's a track here in Daytona, and they got pretty competitive, and me and some friends went up there. We'd actually have tackle boxes full of they're 24 scale slot cars, and we'd go up there as young kids and race the local, and the next thing we know, we're running state races around the state series around the state of Florida. And the next thing you know, we're going to Philadelphia and for a national event, and at a hotel in Philadelphia, they actually rented the ballroom out and set the track up in the inside. And that's where I met your dad in 2007 at the Philly Nats.
Yeah, they didn't take me up there because I had school. Mm-hmm. Otherwise,
you got to keep those grades up too, Alex. But yeah, I know what you mean. And that's where I met your dad, was in 2007. And he was a rival Georgia driver, and we ended up racing in a lot of the same classes. We're running top couple positions. So you build that camaraderie with your dad, and it was fun. And it lasted all the way to this day. So he's actually come down here and stayed right there in my other bedroom here in the house. And he's every night he went to Volusia for the dirt track racing here for Speed Weeks and Volusia Speedway. So then even your dad's mat business, I've taken a couple of sets of mats to some drivers here that needed a last minute sponsor added to their mat for their hauler. So that was really cool. And I ran up to a driver last year for him, but yeah, I've definitely done a lot of slot car racing. Just last year, I went to New Jersey for a national event in the Retro Series.
Okay.
I'm not as involved as I used to be or as I should be, but it's a heck of a hobby. Every time I come back for a one-off race, all the co-drivers there, all the drivers, they welcome me in like I never left, and we're just as competitive. And hopefully we'll see your dad at another track soon. But that was one hobby that we did. Looking back, it wasn't as expensive as my other one. I did go-kart dirt go-karts in the southeast of Florida and Georgia, but mainly in Florida. We were in the state series with the same friend of mine that we did the slot car racing with, and that was from 2013 to 2018. So a good 5 years I ran in the super heavy division here in Florida, and that was a lot of time and energy, and it was worth every bit of it, every penny, for sure. And I
Well, that
wouldn't change it
sounds.
for a thing. But yeah, I do miss it. They just had the nationals here in Daytona for Kart Week, for the Limestone track right outside of Daytona International Speedway, and I got to go hang out. You always catch the bug. You always get bit by the bug when you set foot on the track, and next thing you know, we're talking about how we're going to get ourselves back on track. But yeah, that's it, Alex. Two big hobbies there: go-kart racing and slot car racing, and you meet some really great people. If you know, a lot of the people say that I've raced with, if you love racing, you're cool with me. So that falls with me for sure. Is that atmosphere of being a race fan?
Yeah, well, we all get bit by that bug and have to spend money
Yeah,
doing something. You want to that comes the competitive spirit, I guess, of race fans. They see what's on the track. They gotta have some of that too. I know slot car racing is not nearly what it used to be. I couldn't even think of the nearest slot car track to us. But
yeah. Even
yeah,
your grandfather and grandma, didn't they own a slot car track?
yeah, they did.
Yeah, I went
Right.
to it. Yeah, they had a national event there in '07.
Yeah, yeah, I won some championships there, so I guess I can say I'm national championship too.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's that's something that it seems like a lifetime ago for me.
doesn't it? Yeah, for me
Yeah,
too, actually,
yeah.
Alex, for
So
sure. I mean,
it's very interesting how time works when you look back retrospectively, different points of your life. For me, it's kid racing slot cars, and then growing up being on the flag stand with my dad, and now I'm sitting here doing a podcast with a couple of my friends and getting fans like you to come on and tell your story. So it's very interesting. I'm sure you've had that same sort of retrospective thoughts. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just going too deep.
no,
Uh,
I mean, it's like it seems like the older you get, the faster it goes.
yeah,
And bringing your dad into it is a flag man. Your dad's a flag man at Sonoa Speedway in Georgia, a dirt track, and he went to his first 500. I think it was 2 years ago when it got rained out. He saw the first couple
yeah,
dozen laps. Your dad had to go home, catch his flight, and the race ran later that Monday night, I believe. But um, the people that sat down right in front of us at the Daytona 500 had Sonoa Speedway shirts on.
huh?
Okay, and your dad's sitting in the row behind. What are the odds of them sitting in front of your dad, who's the flag man at Sonoa Speedway? You know,
That's
at the Daytona
that's
500. So
wild.
that was pretty cool. Yeah, I remember
That's
that
wild.
detail.
Yeah. Well, you and I have raced a little bit as well together.
Yes, another
You
hobby.
run
Yes,
on another hobby
yes,
on iRacing. You run the All American ARCA series. You want to talk a little bit about that?
yeah. We're going into our fifth season and virtual racing here. We run Friday nights. Myself and a co-driver, Casey Carrington. He runs most of the day-to-day operations of it. But yeah, we have an All American ARCA series. It's on iRacing. We try to mimic as close to ARCA as it used to be in the mid 2000s. Large fields, ARCA traditional tracks, and ARCA traditional length races, and it's even broadcasted on YouTube. So we have a live YouTube broadcast of the virtual race. It fools people all the time. It looks so real. It looks so real. You think you're watching a real race. It takes some people a few minutes to realize that they're not watching a real race. It's virtual, digital. But I tell you, it's we have great participation, no fast repairs. The cautions, the racing as the seasons went on, has cleaned up. A lot of the drivers renew and return for the from season to season. And last year we had, I think it was around 84 different drivers participate in at least one
Wow.
race, but we averaged 30 cars every race. So we had 12 to 14 races starting at Daytona. We're biased. So there's two super speedways in there, Daytona and Talladega. You got a lot of your intermediate tracks along our schedule, Kentucky, Vegas. There's even one at Twin Rig Motegi. We have one road course race at Sonoma this year on our schedule. So
Okay.
we keep points are updated immediately after the race, and all week long we banter in Discord from one week to the next, and it's great. Alex, you were a part of it, and we love it. I mean, so Friday nights, 8:30 Eastern, starting here coming up in February. We're going to be starting season 5 coming up real soon.
Yeah.
So we'll get you some details on that.
Yeah, well, look forward to seeing some of that. My current work schedule has me to where I can't really run any leagues or anything because I can't have any
It's tough.
commitments because I'm
Yeah,
on, off every other week. So
it's tough. It
uh,
really is. You see that with other drivers in the league. One week they'll be in, 1 week they'll be out. But
yeah,
for the most part, everyone seems pretty engaged. And yeah, it's day to day. We checked to see if the pushing the start times back. Right now, we're starting at 8:30 Eastern, green flag. So that's pretty late for an iRace on a
yeah,
weeknight. It is Friday night, but yeah, I mean, I tell you, it's competitive. It's hard to win a race.
yeah,
I hate to say, but I haven't won a race yet in our league. So I'm good 50 some races in, still haven't won a race. So my
yeah,
goal is to do that this year, and I want to lead some laps too. I've done that in previous seasons here and there, but nothing consistent. So you got to start leading laps. You got to start finishing in the top tens, top fives, and it's great. We have race control. Joseph is our race control, and we try to be very organized. Try to keep the banter down during the race, the radio chatter during the race. Um, a lot of people have their opinions on how leagues should be run, but ours is pretty streamlined, and we like to think it runs its own just by people showing up on time every week and putting
yeah,
on a good show. And we've had almost some caution-free races, 1 or 2 cautions happen at some intermediate tracks last year. So, yeah, we'll hope Daytona starts off with a bang and we get a nice, clean race with a lot of side-by-side 3-wide racing coming up in
yeah.
February 20th.
Well, I will say this: sim racing, although it's pretty, uh, I guess, pretty decent investment to get started, it is probably the cheapest way to go racing.
It is, yeah.
And it's the easiest as well. And you can get connected with so many people across the world in so many different disciplines, especially on the iRacing platform. So if you're not doing it and you're thinking about it, do it.
In our ARCA
It's going to
league,
be a big money sink, but come on.
in our ARCA league, we have a driver from UK and Australia, 2
Oh.
international drivers at least. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're not into oval racing, there's dirt, there's rallycross, there's Formula One, all kinds of stuff. So
Formula cars, yeah. Street stocks, late models, super late models. They're introducing new cars all the time.
All right. Well, that is pretty much all that I can think to ask you about you. Is there anything else that we need to know about Kyle Hall before we move into this year's Rolex 24?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. I appreciate you guys the interest and the love of racing, and that's kind of what brought us together. So yeah, I'm just going to continue keep an eye on NASCAR, IMSA, and all those different racing disciplines, and keep on running our small business here in Daytona and keep making sure everybody's happy and gets their parts on time, and go through all of our day-to-day challenges we have. And it's a good time to be down here for sure, Alex.
All right. Well, with that being said, it is time to get into what you told me was your bread and butter, and that is sports car racing. This weekend, we had the Roar before the 24. We saw qualifying. We saw 2 VP Challenge races. You were there. What can you tell everybody about the fan experience between even these both weekends, the Roar before the 24 and the Rolex 24 weekend itself?
Yeah, it's changed with COVID. It used to be for the first couple of days of January, we would have the Roar. The teams would go home for 3 weeks, work on the cars. Sometimes the cars wouldn't even be wrapped, and they would bring them back for the race, and it would be a whole nother unveil out of the trailers. But this year, since COVID has passed, to keep the travel down, they had the Roar test the week before the race. The cars do not go back home to their shops. They stay here in Daytona all week long. And the Roar is it's every year people comment on how crowded it is, and that was the case this year again. They do scout days. A lot of the Boy Scouts are camped out in the infield. Some of the RVers are already in town. We've already parked our RV in the infield, and we're ready to go. And so the Roar gave us a chance to get sorted, get in early, see the cars, see the brand new cars too, the GTPs, the LMDHs, some of the IndyCar drivers the NASCAR drivers that are participating. It really is the reunion, so to say, of drivers and you get to see that at the Roar play out right in front of you. It gives you an idea what the race is going to look like. We get an eye on timing and scoring. You'll see a lot of people on their phones and iPads throughout the week. Keep an eye on timing and scoring and different storylines throughout. That we had qualifying that already took place this past Sunday, and we have the Acuras on pole. The Tom Blomqvist and the number 60 Michael Shank race and Acura LMDH put it on pole, which was only 0.6 of a second off of the track record. Okay, that was set by the Mazda Oliver Jarvis in 2019. So already these new cars, they will evolve, they will get faster as the years go on. It's the very first year of the platform, so the track record might very well go down next year in qualifying. But and you also have the production based ranks GT cars. We have a brand new Ferrari, a brand new Porsche. There's 7 Porsches in the race, I want to say, and they're actually on the back heel. They're lobbying for a BOP change, a balance of performance change. They feel that their car's at a disadvantage from the Roar going into the Rolex. So we're going to see if that they do get a break. IMSA, I'm sure, is reviewing the data from the Roar to make it a nice, fair, competitive race. And we have the new cars, the LMP3 class. This should be the last year of the LMP3 class. There's 9 cars racing. They have a lot of entry level bronze rated drivers, silver rated drivers that are trying to break into the sports car scene. So you will see some new names and some old names in the LMP3 series class. And of course, you got the GT Daytona Pro. That is going to be the show alongside Hypercar, of course. But I tell you, there's going to be 9 cars, and they're all a different manufacturer. Corvette, a single Corvette, a single Mercedes, and the WeatherTech Mercedes, a harder racing Aston Martin. You have the plaid Plaf Porsche, the one that won last year. So the Pro class, it's very diverse. 1 car for each manufacturer, essentially. Turner BMW moved up. They have 2 cars. They moved up 1 car into the top Pro class too. So we're going to get to see some attrition happen in the GT Daytona ranks, and then we're going to get to see how whoever in the Pro class, it's going to be a 24-hour sprint. So whoever has the least amount of time on pit road should be up front in that Pro class race. So, and of course, GTP, they're a new car. They're a little concerned of reliability that comes along with new cars. Make it the entire 24-hour, and on average, I'm pretty sure that it's a good several seconds quicker. GTPs over LMP2s. The P2 car field feels that they were slowed a little too much, and they need to have another second, up to 2 seconds given back to them. So like the Porsches and GT Daytona, we're keeping an eye to see if LMP2 gets a performance break to get closer to the GTP cars, and that will eliminate clashes with LMP3. So there's a lot going on in those 5 classes, Alex, trying to keep them all balanced and the time separate from each class. It's a tough job.
Yeah. So you went through a lot there, and there's a lot to break down within each point that you made.
Yeah.
First and foremost, we saw qualifying, 15-minute sessions, 20 minutes for the GTP cars, what have you. Something that was really not expected was we saw Nick Tandy crash in the bus stop.
Yes.
So that was definitely something that you didn't want to see for Porsche and Penske Racing.
Right.
They're going to have to basically rebuild the whole nose of that car. Do you think that's a big setback, despite the fact that Porsche has the most miles and the most testing on their car?
It is a big setback because you keep on hearing the supply chain issues happening, and that's getting parts for these new cars. And so they may have the manpower to do it, but it may not be in their control. But I'm pretty sure they at least have 1 set of spares that Multimatic Porsche has built up. And they've actually sold some customer cars to privateer teams like JDC Miller Racing, like Proton Competition in Europe, that those cars aren't ready yet. They're not here at the Rolex. So it's evident that in the Porsche camp, they already have a shortage of parts. But I haven't heard anything of them struggling at this point. Everything should be fine for race week. They should have a new nose, a new front end. If all carbon fiber ready to bolt back right onto that car, clip right back on. And if any team can overcome that, it's going to be Penske Porsche for sure. So I'm gonna say that it is a setback for them, but I know they're in scramble mode right now to get the spares ready for the Rolex, because if they have another incident again, they'll be in real trouble.
Right. And you mentioned it a bunch, the GTPs, these hypercars. I kind of want to break down a little bit of how this kind of homologation, I'll say, of rule sets has come to pass. So we used to see the DPI cars. They were supposedly a bit quicker than these cars were supposed to be this year. Definitely lighter, shorter. I didn't have the electrification. But with the push for hybridization in all motorsports, and biofuels, electrification, like with Formula E and stuff, the WEC and IMSA came together and kind of made something to where they wanted to see if we could put American teams at Le Mans and European teams at Daytona. We haven't really seen that come to fruition yet.
That crossover, yeah.
But the crossover is looking to happen as early as next year.
I think so.
So
yeah.
Let's go through some of these teams. Do you want to go over the European teams or the American teams first?
Let's go with European WEC teams.
Okay.
And the hypercar class.
Yeah. So currently in the hypercar class, we've got Toyota, Peugeot, Ferrari, Porsche, and Van Wall. And then the Glickenhaus is also there, but it's not a hybrid. So already that's way more cars than we've had at Le Mans in the top class for the last several years. I think the max that I've seen is 6. And right now we're looking at 13 this coming year. And then not BMW, Cadillac is sending some American teams over there. So is there any team that you wanted to talk about from the European ranks specifically?
Yeah, and all those teams, those are manufacturers, Alex, and they all have two cars at least, except for Van Wall, except for Glickenhaus, and Van Wall is the Bicalis operation, but I mean, you just mentioned Ferrari, Porsche. You have the Peugeots that they have all built brand new cars for this rule set, and they're going to be racing at Le Mans for the first time. The Ferraris, and the WEC round 1 is going to be at Sebring. So, a matter of fact, these cars, the first wheels they're going to turn competitively, will be on American soil at Sebring for the 8 hours of Sebring, the day before the 12 hours of Sebring.
Right.
And you got two Ferraris, 2 Penske Porsches. You got at least 1 Cadillac from Ganassi that's running it. Right. And that single WEC Cadillac is racing here at IMSA. So the big benefit of the new rule set is that the same car can, in theory, be raced at the 24 hours of Daytona in the top class and win overall. And you can take that same car and bring it to Le Mans 24 hours in France and go for overall. That hasn't been the case for decades. You would have to have a different car. You would LMP1, Grand Am, Daytona prototype. There was always some hurdle to get through, and it just wasn't unified. So with that being said, they've worked a good 4 or 5 years behind the scenes to get to this point, to get to the point of the Rolex here this year. Unfortunately for this year, 2023, those Ferraris, the Peugeots, they're not quite ready to race at the Rolex in Daytona as a one-off event that their car is eligible for. So next year, I suspect we're going to see that. I really want to see that Ferrari. I know I'm going to get to see it in a couple of months at Sebring, but I really want to see it at Daytona with the Toyotas. Wouldn't that be cool? The stalwarts that have not left WEC, that have been loyal since they've entered in 2012. Right. And now they got some competition, those Toyotas. They had a couple of rough years running against basically just themselves, but they were showcasing very impressive technology that eventually made its way back to their road-going cars they produced at Toyota. So at the end of the day, that's what all endurance racing is about. That's what 24-hour racing is about. That's what has attracted me to it. A lot of our regular items that we use on our road going cars, on your car and my car, every day have origins at Le Mans from these cars. These are actual prototypes. They call them a prototype for a reason, and that means that it's a new technology under development. So, yeah, the windshield wipers, headlights for running at night, power steering. A lot of these basic functions that we use on a day-to-day basis, their origins go back to the automotive manufacturer developing that to race a car 24 hours at Le Mans. And that's still the case to this day with these hypercars going electric. You know, you've heard the past year or two everybody getting all up in arms about being forced to electric vehicles. Well, myself and a lot of other people who love racing, we just looked at the WEC in 2014, in 2015. Porsche, Audi, and Toyota, they were running hybrids at that point in time,
Right.
battery operated, flywheel. They had different attacks, different approaches to the same rule book. So we knew it was coming as long as 8 years ago. So it's no surprise to me that we're now here at Daytona running these hybrids, and they will eventually. The technology is being tested in racing, and will make its way to our road going cars that we drive
Right.
daily.
And speaking of Toyota, who's been doing it for the longest,
Yeah.
if you go to a dealership and you go to get, I think it's the RAV4, they have a hybrid RAV4 that gets 98 miles to the gallon, and an SUV that gets 98 miles to the gallon. So we lost Kyle there for a second. He'll probably be back. So road relevancy is something that is a must for manufacturers to get into sports car racing. And it helps all of us out, just like Kyle was saying. So when I look at some of this stuff, I'm like, okay, I hear complaints from old fans, old heads talking about, oh, well, we're losing the GT stuff. We're losing this. We're losing that. We're getting this. And then so whatever. But we have not seen this much manufacturer support for sports car racing in probably the last 10 years. Kyle alluded to it. We had just a few cars, even down just to Toyota, running 2 or 3 cars at Le Mans for a couple of years. And we really thought that the World Endurance Championship that started in 2012 might not make it, just based off of top class not really being there. But now it's back. We're going to have 15 cars at Le Mans. We talked about who was going to be there. But we're going to have more coming up next year. So BMW is looking at taking their LMDH to Le Mans next year. Lamborghini is looking to come on next year in both IMSA and WEC competition. So we could probably have a decent size Formula One grid worth of these hybrid cars. And that's something that's very interesting to me, because I've never seen that many cars in the top tier of a motorsport, whether it be ALMS, IMSA, Grand Am Series, WEC, or ELMS, or Asian Le Mans Series. So sports car racing tends to have 6 to 8 cars in the top ranks. And now we're looking at potentially having, closer to 20 at Le Mans. So that's really interesting. I'm hoping Kyle will get back here shortly. But until then, I guess I can go over some stuff. I'm looking at some of these cars here. It's amazing to see just how many teams are going to be here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 12 different teams running either in WEC or IMSA. And with the news that Andretti Autosport buying into Wayne Taylor Racing and potentially having a second Acura, that means we could get 3 Acuras on grid for next season. and that would be very good. I'm assuming that Kyle's phone died, so I'm trying to fill the air to get him back on. But I'm struggling myself here with congestion and everything, so I apologize for all the noise that I'm making. Like I said, I was sick for probably a couple weeks. The one thing that we were going to do left was take a look at the spotter guide for this weekend's racing. We're going to have a couple races. They'll have the Porsche Cup. They'll have the Pilot Challenge races and everything else. But I really wanted to go over that with Kyle because this is more of his passion than it is for me. I just like it because I like racing. I'm not necessarily 100% into everything just as much as he is. So hopefully we'll get him back up. But within that, there other points that we wanted to get to were the GT Daytona and GT Daytona Pro balance of power discussion. In 2022, they eliminated the GT Le Mans, which is the pro side of GT Daytona, cars, which were GTE, and they took that from being a separate class that was faster than the regular GTs to a class that was homogeneous, just having pro drivers into it. And Kyle is back. So I'm talking about the GTE cars that we no longer see being, a homogeneous class as GT Daytona. There's a lot of complaints from people because you've got two of the same, basically the same cars racing each other with no real manufacturer support because of the platform. I'm assuming they did that because they were moving to the hypercars in the upper class. But
yep.
Does it bother you that we've got cars that are intermingled? We saw all last year. There were GTD cars that were beating 2, 3, 4 GTD Pro cars throughout all the 10 races.
It doesn't bother me. And that happened again at the Roar this weekend, where you saw for qualifying 3 of the top 4. 3 were technically the amateur class,
right?
GT Daytona, but they had their pro driver in there, and the 4th they were all Mercedes, by the way, and but I thought it would, but it really doesn't. It would bother me if they were different specs, if they were different a spec of cars, but these are all identical. And the only thing that's different is the drivers. In theory, the only deciding factor between the two classes is the drivers, Alex. So no, it doesn't. I think it's kind of a little unique element to the racing this year, and it did happen twice last year where GT Daytona class car beat the pro drivers, which is saying something because those pro guys are fast.
So with that, 2024, they're coming out with new regulations for GT3 cars. They're going to be basically souped up GT3s with a little bit more manufacturer support.
Yes.
Corvette is going to have 2 entries next year. Mustang is coming back, having 2 entries next year. So this 2-year gap where we've got these cars like this, where we're not having manufacturer support, that goes out the window next year. My question to you is, though, with Lamborghini and I believe Lamborghini and then the Wayne Taylor Racing expanding in the GTP class, you're looking at potentially 3 more. You've got the JDC Racing for potentially a 3rd Porsche next year.
Yes, that's confirmed even later this year.
How is that going to change who we see on the grid next year? Because we're going to have even more GT cars. I know we're losing LMP3, but how is that going to sorry.
No problem.
How is that going to change the grid in GT? Are we going to see people get get bumped off of the starting grid because they can't make it to the 61 grid race. Like this year, we had 70 plus entries.
And that's awesome. There's a reserve list like Le Mans has. The Le
Sorry.
Mans they have a reserve list, Alex, and there's some controversy where out of the pros, an Acura was left on that reserve list this year. The KCMG, they ran a Porsche last year. They're out of Taiwan. They were left on the reserve list this year because they did not elect to run a full IMSA. They did not elect to run the Michelin Endurance Cup, which is the 4-race championship. So if you enter those two championships, you get priority in your Rolex entry. So since KCMG only entered as a one-off at the Rolex, unfortunately they were left out on the entry list, and that hurts. So that's a very high quality team that was left out. You don't see that in NASCAR, but yeah, you definitely it's gonna the elimination LMP3 will help on the grid space, but IMSA is going to make the wise decision. They're going to have a selection committee. They're going to make the right decisions on who deserves to be on the grid, who doesn't. And by the way, there is a manufacturer's fee that you have to pay
Right.
to be on the grid in IMSA, and IMSA is pretty firm on that. And a boutique manufacturer that you mentioned earlier, Glickenhaus, well, they're not on the Rolex entry list because they do not produce X amount of cars to satisfy and that entry fee, which is rumored to be about $1 million. So it doesn't
Wow.
make sense for a small boutique manufacturer like Glickenhaus to pay that to get on the grid, whereas Ferrari and Porsche they all have their advertising budget to do so. Now, the interesting thing would be next year that I mentioned about the hypercars is if Peugeot comes over from Europe, are they going to have to pay that fee? They don't sell cars here in the United States. It may not work for them. They may bypass the Rolex because of that.
Right.
So there's a lot of deciding factors. But a company like Toyota, I hope that they do pay that fee because I would love to see their hypercar race at the Rolex next year against the Penske Porsches, against that JDC Miller Porsche that should be on the grid next year, Cadillac, so on, Lambo, which is their Iron Lynx is going to be the running the Lambo
Yeah.
factory program. So man, it goes on and on. It's fun. And you can see that the WEC on the other side of the pond, they've already made those changes. They've already eliminated the GT Pro class. Now they just have GTM. And there's talks that they might eliminate LMP2 next year to create room for these hypercar, or the following year. Excuse me. They've already released the entry list for 2023 this year coming up. So we got a lot of deciding factors to see what happens.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go get myself some water and stuff. I can still hear you. Everybody else can still hear you. If you would like, could you
Yeah.
let's start looking at the spotter guide. The smallest class, LMP3, I think that's a good place to start. So kind of give some people some pointers on who to watch for and everything like that. And then I'll be right back as soon as I can to help get through some of these other classes like LMP2, GTP Pro, and
Yeah, LMP2 is probably one of my favorite classes. So,
all right, so
yeah,
be right
LMP3.
back.
No problem, Alex. We'll start with LMP3, and you got the Riley Motorsports and their Ligier. You have several Duqueen LMP3 cars on the grid. You have and a couple of driver changes. James French was able to get into the number 43 LMP3 car. They had a driver that was complaining of visibility issues in his car, so it was a bronze rated driver. So they were able to get James French in the car for the Rolex. That's going to be an interesting tidbit. They seem fast at 43 car, but when I was at the Roar this past week and I saw them off on at least 2 or 3 different occasions, they had an off-track excursion. So we'll keep an eye on those guys. And you have the Sean Creech Motorsports. This is their second year in the Rolex, and they finished second last year, so they're a little hungry for a win. That's got Joao Barbosa as one of their headlining drivers, and it's going to be a good time on the LMP3 class to see who's going to emerge and take that Rolex. You also have a defending winner of the LMPC class, JDC Miller Racing. They're running LMP3 as they wait on their Porsche that they've ordered for hypercar. So that is a very stout, experienced team. It seems like they're running a lot of new silver-rated drivers that are trying to get their feet wet in sports car racing and burst onto the IMSA scene. So there's 9 cars there in that LMP3 class, and let's see if they stay out of trouble and make it to the end of the race. We're gonna, as Alex comes back here, the LMP3, the attrition rate is these cars have been through a couple of 24-hour races now. They should easily make it to the finish. The goal is just to keep your nose clean throughout the entire night and try to make it to the finish with as little time on pit road, as little time in the garage as possible. And teams like JDC Miller, like Sean Creech, like Gar Robinson's Riley Motorsports team, they're experienced. They got some good experience in these long distance races, so they're going to be a factor. It's the question is to see if some of these newer teams like that 43 and the AWA Amazon Racing team, if they come in with their 2 DuQuins, how competitive they're going to be. So you got the 4 main teams, and the new ones are going to come in too.
For me, the 36 of the Andretti Autosport.
Jared Andretti, yep.
I'm looking at that just because they just started their merger with Wayne Taylor Racing, so they're going to have a little bit more, I guess, engineering and experience from that side of things. So they could be someone that's a dark horse to win that class. But my question is, there's rumor that they're going to have 2 cars next year in the GDP class. Man. With Wayne Taylor Racing. So I'm wondering if that 36 car is going to become that second car, or if they're still going to compete in the LMP3 program that eventually comes out next year. Because I'm not really sure where these cars are going if they're not going to be in the main show.
And that was what team again, Alex?
Wayne Taylor Racing. This was announced Saturday at the Roar.
There's a tidbit on that. I learned on the podcast with Graham Goodwin and Marshall Pruitt, the daily, one of the sports car racing podcasts that I listen to, and they don't expect them to be in 2025 to have a car. It's possible that, in fact, they've announced an entry, not an entry. They've announced an intention to go to Le Mans next year with Andretti, with Wayne Taylor. They're running an Acura here in the United States. They need to clear that with Honda, because as we all know, Acura does not sell cars in France and Europe, so they would have to run under the Honda banner in Europe, and that's gonna take some working on behind the scenes to make happen. But I know that they're willing and able to do so. But that Andretti Autosport link up is very interesting. Andretti Autosport has not made it a secret that they want to participate in IMSA in a prototype. They've got history of that in ALMS when they ran Marco and the Acura team, even in the LMP2 days. I was fortunate enough to see that car at the Petit Le Mans race that I went to in 2008. But Andretti Autosport's looking, and they got their Formula One ambitions they've announced. So Andretti Autosport is building a brand new facility in Indianapolis, and the goal is to have Wayne Taylor's outfit run out of that entire. I guess it's a gigantic facility going up. So we're going to find out more about that.
Square feet or something.
Yeah. And so they're going to run all these programs out of that one building. So that LMP3 Andretti entry is interesting. They are definitely dipping their toe in the water. I'm not sure how serious that one is that's going to evolve to run the factory team. So, but yeah, the good news is that Andretti has stated intentions. They're coming in one way or another.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the LMP2 cars. For me, I was looking at the number 18 Era Motorsport with Ollie Jarvis and Dwight Merriman.
Yeah, Paul-Loup Chatain.
Yeah.
And is it Ryan DL?
I think so.
Yeah.
That to me is seeing Ollie and Dwight in that car is something that I think is going to be a big hurdle for some of these other guys to get back into. Joao Barbosa is back as well after I think he basically got fired from the Whelen Engineering car. That seemed a lot more dirty than they let on in the broadcasts and stuff. And then for me, Ben Keating, he's like the last true American hero because that man has driven everything
Yeah,
in sports car racing. So I'm
he's
looking at the
he's the
LMP2
best.
class.
Yeah, he's the best bronze in the world, Ben Keating, as far as speed goes, and all the bronzes aspire to be like him. I've noticed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that class to me looks like it's going to be the most fun that it's been in a while.
LMP2, yeah. There's 10 cars, Alex, right?
Yeah.
We got 10 LMP2s, and if you look into it, I mean, every team's very experienced. You have a lot of European teams. You mentioned earlier about the crossover Europeans. A lot of them are here in the LMP2 class. Algrave Pro Racing, which is running the CrowdStrike operation. You have the TDS racing team. They're Mikkel Jensen, who was quick last year. Stephen Thomas, Renus VK, an IndyCar driver. Scott Huffinger, a very fast silver driver. They're going to be in the hunt. They got 2 cars, and they're experienced. This isn't their first go around to Daytona. They were here last year. You got high class racing too. Also, Dennis Anderson, Ed Jones, the IndyCar regular, and Anderson Forbach, a fairly fast bronze driver. They're going to be, they're going to rely on a lot of their WEC experience in the long distance races. And then, of course, you got Rick Ware Racing, a NASCAR team that seems to have branched into every form, and including IndyCar, and evident here in their IMSA LMP2
He's got a
program.
Supercross. He's got a Supercross rider this year too. It's wild. That man loves racing. He bought into an NHRA team as well, so he's got everything now.
Yeah, officially everything.
He's going to own the whole world of motorsports here shortly.
And you can find him here in this LMP2. So there's some high class, world class teams. I said high class racing, world class teams in LMP2 going for the LMP2 class win at Daytona. And it's a one-off event. It's not in the LMP2 points championship in IMSA. So we're gonna see some close racing. There's some talks if Hypercar has some of their issues, LMP2 team could emerge to win. But I really, if I'm gonna put my money on, I'm gonna say a Hypercar team will win.
Yeah. So we'll get into that when we talk about the GTP class itself.
Yep.
Because I've got some things to say about that. But I think let's go ahead and get with GT Daytona. First off and foremost, Mercedes dominated qualifying. They qualified on pole in both GTD and GTD Pro. WeatherTech Racing taking the GTD Pro series. Both drivers that qualified in the 79 and the 57 were like, yeah, this doesn't matter. We've got a 24-hour race to go. So despite Mercedes being fast on the time clock, do you see them being a 24-hour threat, or is that just them being bashful in Victory Circle on Saturday?
They're gonna be a threat for sure. They're gonna be a threat in Pro and GT Daytona just by numbers in GT Daytona. But every year it seems like there's always a car that has a little upper edge coming out of the roar. This year, you could argue for one, let me backtrack a little bit. That single McLaren that we have ran a very quick lap in one of the sessions, and I need to look at the combined results, but I'm pretty sure it put them number one out of. So there's a McLaren in there, Alex, that is fast on one lap.
That's probably the number 70 Inception Racing.
70 Inception McLaren. Racing McLaren, yes.
Yeah. They won the pole at Mid-Ohio last year.
Wow, that's so cool. And there was 2 McLarens last year. This year we got the one there. They got experience running in Asia in the Asian Le Mans series. And then, I mentioned the Porsches. There's 7 Porsches in the field, 1 Pro, and they feel that they're at a disadvantage. They've been very vocal about that and the BOP stance. So we're going to find out about the GT Daytona. Daytona has a known history of being gentle with the Porsche cars. You want to be in a Porsche at Daytona. This year, it sounds like a little different in the Rolex.
Well, all of those cars are brand new, aren't they?
They are.
They're the new 919 platform, I think.
Yep, 993, and they even
993.
the Ferrari's brand new, the 296 Ferrari. The Lambo has an Evo package, an upgrade
Yeah.
kit. Same with their Mercedes. So, and the BMWs, you got Paul Miller Racing and the #1 BMW. They missed the Rolex last year, if you remember. They were waiting on their brand new BMW GT3 car to come in, and they were delayed. They did not. The factory team had it, but not them. So they're here this year. And they're a threat to win with Madison Snow and their team. And Turner BMW, they will be a threat also. There's two
They're always
strong
a threat.
BMWs, Alex. If Mercedes doesn't win, maybe the Gradient Racing team, if they don't win in GT Daytona, I would definitely call on one of those two BMWs to be right up there. Turner always seems to get it together, no matter how good or bad of a roar they had. They always seem to make it overnight and run up front.
Yeah. Well, if they're going to do that, they're going to have to go through a large field. It's something like 33 total of both Pro and Am series.
Yeah.
So, I think some of the biggest things that I'm looking at is we have an all-female cast.
And the Iron Lynx Ferrari, yeah.
The Iron Dames Ferrari.
Yeah.
They changed their name from Iron Lynx to Iron Dames for obvious reasons. Or Lamborghini. I don't know why I said Ferrari. So I'm looking at that to be something very interesting going forward, because the Iron Lynx team, like you said earlier, is going to the hypercar class next year.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if they're going to also take the all-female team as well. Drivers are Rachel Frey, Sarah Bovoy, Michelle Gadding, and Duran Penn. I've never heard of any of these people.
Okay.
And I'll say that as someone who doesn't really watch sports car racing. When I think of sports car racing, I think of Catherine Legge, who's wonderful when it comes to female motorsports drivers.
Yeah, and the Iron Lynx team, I would say, in my opinion, that Dorian Penn is the fastest of the four. She has been on it. She's even got an LMP2 test lined up for her.
Okay.
Later this year, and WEC. So, and you know they ran European Le Mans Series and WEC, and they did get a win at the last race in the European Le Mans Series with the stout competition. They were driving a Ferrari. They got, and leading up to that win, which was the season finale, they got a couple of podium finishes leading up into that. So this quartet of female drivers will be, well, for one, they're going to be a threat to the class win, in my opinion, because of their experience and success they had last year. And they're just continuing that on with a Lamborghini, which is totally different than what they've raced last year. They ran the Ferraris last year. A very interesting tidbit is this quartet, these four female drivers, they did not even get to drive their new Lambo until the Roar. There was no shakedown. There was no preseason tests for them until they got to the Roar. So there was a lot of getting up to speed. Hopefully them being in the same team and the same driving pairings should help them transition to the Lambo. So there is a challenge with the new car for them, but I want to say I'm looking forward to seeing how well they do. This isn't the first female team taking a stab at Daytona. So all-female team. We remember Catherine was involved in another one with Bia Figueroa, the Brazilian IndyCar driver. They ran an Acura a couple of years back in a program. But nonetheless, Iron Lynx, they're a very ambitious team. They got one Lambo in Pro. They got two in GT Daytona. And they got Roman Grosjean driving their Pro Lambo, their ex-Formula One driver. So you will see them run that LMDH Lambo program next year. They've already got the contract. They've already won the bid. So they're using all this experience running GT cars here at Daytona. They're going to apply it next year for sure.
Yeah, there's so many. Like, we could probably spend all night talking about some of these different storylines. I'm scrolling up and down, looking at the driver lineups and everything. I'm seeing people I know like Harry Ticknall, Laura Spinelli, and all these other drivers that are really well known Even to the NASCAR guys, you've got
Oh
the
yeah,
75 GTD of Kenny Habul, who Sun Energy One was a sponsor of many NASCAR drivers earlier on.
yeah.
And then you've got a bunch of IndyCar drivers as well. Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin are in LMP2, I believe.
Yep.
And then Colton Herta is double dipping for both BMW Rahal Lanigan cars. He'll be filling in 2 hours minimum for each the 24 and the 25 car in GTP. So that's interesting.
I'm pretty sure if you run the numbers, Alex, it's well over 3/4 of the IndyCar driver field is in the Rolex 24 hours. It's amazing. Yeah, including Newgarden's first attempt, Scott McLaughlin, and Newgarden's tried to. In fact, on that podcast with Marshall Pruitt and Graham Goodwin, they've talked about Newgarden in 2014, 2015 carrying a helmet and a driver's suit around the roar trying to land an IMSA ride, and he didn't get one.
How could you do that? He's a 2-time Indy championship.
I know, and you can track back to 2014 and 2015 of him scouring the IMSA paddock for a ride. I mean, it's amazing. So he finally made the deal happen this year, and there's a lot of speculation that Newgarden's getting his toes wet in prototypes for dipping his toes in the water to go hypercar racing in the near future.
Awesome. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
So before we move to GTP, which we're going to go through every single car because there's only 9 of them.
9.
Is there anybody in GTD that you want to focus on before we move up? I know I'd like to get in GTD Pro, talk a little bit about the 9 car with Plath Racing.
Yep, and I want to say the one is the Aston Martins. We were talking about earlier. I don't want to leave them out by mistake because they were atop of a lot of the sessions. They have the Harder Racing team. They have 1 car each in Pro and AM. GT Daytona,
and then they've got Magnus Racing coming over as well, and that's a European conglomerate when it comes to that. Andy Lally returning to race in that Magnus Racing car, and then one of the fan favorite drivers for GT racing in the world, Nicky Tim, is also heading that car as well. So they've got what, 4 cars this year? 2 and
we look at. I got to pull up the list for myself, Alex, but you think I'd have it memorized by now as many times as I've looked at it. But
I think there's 2 Harder Racing cars. There's the Magnus Racing car, and then there's one other GTD Pro.
Team. And they if you look at their drivers, they're silvers and bronze rated drivers. They really technically should be in GTD, but
TGMTF Sport. That's
but they're Owen Trinkler, their silver rated driver, did turn some pretty quick laps up and quick enough in some sessions to be in the top 2 or 3. So that's kind of neat. And you got that what was that team's name? There's 2 Harder Racings.
Magnus Racing is the
Magnus, and that 4th one.
That was it. Those are the 4.
Okay. And so there's 2 in the Pro, 2 in the AM, and throughout the Mercedes, I would see some Astons up in the top 5, splitting some of those Mercedes. So we'll see how well they do. That Harder Racing had a really good championship run last year, so we're going to get to see if they win a Daytona Rolex.
Yeah, and it's going to be exciting. There's a lot of cars. There's a lot of good drivers. This is the most excited I've been for Rolex in quite a long time. Mostly just because of the top class, but that is what it is. FAF is reigning champions in GT Daytona Pro.
Yeah, and the class winners last year. Yep.
Yeah, and they won this class last year. They're always going to be a threat. I'm looking forward to see what they can do. They are a privateer team, so that's always interesting to watch.
And they looked strongly at hypercar. They looked strongly at graduating to the hypercar class, Alex, and getting one of those Porsche 963s, those brand new ones. Well, maybe next year we'll see if they become a customer team. But look at the drivers. I mean, they are definitely going to be leading some laps at the Rolex. And I keep on hearing about the BOP being a little low. So we're gonna see.
I'm hoping as a Corvette fan we see something this year, but I don't know. Since they nerfed the GTE class and that car, I don't think we're going to see anything till 2024. So I won't even talk about the lineup on the number 3 Corvette. Let's get into the top class then. That's the last thing that we have to do before we've given everybody a look into what's going to happen this weekend. We can start from the bottom of the list that I gave you, and that starts right off with the fastest number 60 Meyer Shank Racing car, that Acura. We saw Acura win the championship last year. Thought that this kind of would kind of stifle them a little bit with the move to hypercar after seeing testing struggles over the offseason. But they came right out on top and took pole.
They did. And Tom Blomqvist was the driver to do it. And he has BMW factory experience to draw upon. He won one or two poles last year in DPI. And Leo, as we know, is Indy 500 winner last year and is loyal to Michael Shank Racing. And Simone Pageant, I mean, 2 Indy 500 winners in your car. Tom Blomqvist, like we spoke about, and Colin Braun, who is moving over from LMP3 class with Core Autosport was the team he drove for. They have since folded and Collins got himself a nice secure ride with Meyer Shank Racing and that Acura. And he
definitely deserves to be up there because he has been one of the best drivers in LMP3 for the last few years.
And he gets credit for driver coach as a driver coach for a lot of these, but the stakes are high for Colin this year. He is back into the GTP class. He's got plenty of Daytona prototype experience to draw upon in the past. He's got LMP2 experience from the Orca, so that he ran with Core Autosport in seasons past. So you're going to see Colin be just fine in that trio along with Tom, Elio, and Simone. And then you got the Cadillacs, which are at the Roar. They actually had all 3 of them were witnessed to be sparking. A lot of the engineers didn't really comment a whole lot on that reason. Some of them were speculating it was tire pressures were low. The geometry of the Cadillacs are still being developed, are still coming into play as the new life of the car is being born, and we're getting to see that right in front of us with how low the cars were running. So you had the 31 Pipo Derani, Alexander Sims, and a British driver Jack Aiken, and running that Whelen Engineering car for Cadillac.
Yeah, and then you got Chip Ganassi Racing, of course.
Where one of those cars, one of those Cadillacs, the O2, is technically their WEC race. So this is a one-off. They're not running for the IMSA championship. Earl Bamber, Alex Lynn, Richard Westbrook. Richard has previous experience with Ganassi by being a Ford GT driver. And then Alex Lynch, he's ran in DPI with Wayne Taylor Racing, and Earl Bamber, we know he's got experience in the Porsche 919 LMP1 days. So those are some stout drivers that Ganassi has hired to run those.
And their other car is not a slouch either. Sebastian Bourdais dominated pole sitting last year. Ringer van der Zande is synonymous with sports car racing, and Scott Dixon is multi-time Indy 500 and Indy car champion. So
two IndyCar legends, and Bourdais and Dixon, and then Van de Zande, who's a recent sports car ace, has emerged.
Yeah.
And they're going to be a threat to win. They got some miles in that Cadillac. If you remember Petit Le Mans, they had a little incident where they took each other out at the very last hour of the race. So, Mr. Ganassi wasn't too thrilled about that. I'm sure he's had some stern talks with his drivers, but they're ready to pounce at the Rolex, and that blue and that yellow caddy, they look sharp, and they're going to be leading some laps.
I don't know, man. I don't like the liveries. I like the liveries from last year so much better.
Sure,
those primary color ones. I get where they're coming from, but and the Whelen Engineering cars it doesn't look right because there's no white on it. So I don't know. I'm picky when it comes to paint schemes, but I will say this. If you're an American motorsports fan, you have 3 cars to watch and to root for, because if nothing else, these are the best sounding cars on the racetrack. I swear when they go out on the pit lane and switch from the electric motor to the internal combustion engine, it makes me want to put jorts and cowboy boots on, run outside, and just shoot 12 gauges from my hip. I mean, it just screams freedom.
And that is interesting you mentioned that, because we've seen a lot of clips online, haven't we, of the cars leaving. They sound like an RC car, don't they? An electric RC car. And that has been happening since 2015 with the Toyotas, with the Audis, with the Toyotas, Audis, and the Porsche. So if you go back, there's video of them but it's really gotten the attention lately of casual observers, American fans even.
Yeah, just because the Cadillac.
They can't believe it's a sight to behold of a car quietly leaving the pits and then them dropping the clutch and the car.
It sounds like a dragon. Like, I'm not even going to. It's just.
Yeah.
It's just. It's amazing, and all the cars do that, but the Cadillac just hits that note.
Man, every car I've seen do it. The BMW, and there was talk that IMSA was going to put a regulation in that it needs to be mandatory, that the car must leave on electric power, must leave the pit stall on electric power. In fact, some of these hybrids and hypercars, the rules say that they must be able to do a lap on pit road speed limiter around Le Mans, which is about 8.5 miles, on the battery power or hybrid power only. No internal combustion engine help, on the battery power only. So
that's
there was talk IMSA was going to implement that here, but with the early life of the car, the early days of life of the car, they haven't implemented it yet. They might have to homologate that in the rules. But yeah, we're gonna see. It's really cool to see people comment and the reaction to the cars leaving pit road, when really it's been happening since 2015, when the WEC cars. So they've adopted that here in IMSA now with these new rules.
Yeah. Well, moving on to some more people on the running list. We've got Rahal Letterman, however that is. BMW team. They're pushing a hybrid V8 as well. Their two cars, 25 and 24 car, Philippine Augusto Farfus, Marco Whitman, and then Connor DeFilippi, Nick Yalali.
Yep, he's a new factory driver. He just got his contract. Sheldon Vanderlinde, and of course Colton that you mentioned is moonlighting between each car. Mm-hmm.
So those guys are looking good. Those cars look really good. Those are the ones that iRacing has on. So if you race this past weekend on the virtual Daytona 24, you're probably really familiar with those cars. Of course, second Acura, Wayne Taylor Racing, Ricky Taylor as always. Philippe Albuquerque moves over to that team. Luis Delatraz, and then Brendan Hartley, Formula F1 driver. So that's a stacked field as well. They've got the Andretti IndyCar engineers and stuff down there with them now, so that's going to be interesting. And
I've even heard that Ricky's in line to get an IndyCar test with Andretti Autosport through this new partnership with Wayne Taylor.
Okay, well that's going to be cool. We could probably see him run a Indy 500 then.
And I think Ricky's already sampled a IndyCar in his career at Sebring a couple of years back. I'm not sure if that was through Andretti Autosport or not, but we need to look back into that, Alex. But hey, I tell you, Brendan Hartley is the Porsche LMP1 ace, Toyota factory driver also currently. You have Luis Delatraz, who is very fast, LMP2 champion in European Le Mans Series this past year. And he's an up-and-coming driver, Luis Delatraz, rated gold. And I tell you, he's also linked up with an LMP2 team. He's got himself a little IMSA LMP2 program later in the year after his Rolex commitments here. But hey, he's getting seat time in a GTP hypercar. That's good for him in his career. Felipe Albuquerque, what else could you say about him? United Autosports LMP2 ace, going back and forth between Wayne Taylor and that LMP2 program's extremely talented Portuguese driver, one of the fastest in the world, won the Rolex before in his first attempt, in 2013, I believe, in an Audi GT car. So I tell you, they're going to be up front. They're going to be they were quickest in some sessions this past weekend at the Roar, and it looks like the Acura is the quickest car out of the hypercars.
Yep.
So we're going to get to see Wayne and Michael Shane go at it in the same car.
Yeah, and then all that's left is the two Porsches, the number 6 and number 7. We talked about Nick Tandy getting into the barriers and kind of ruining the front fascia on that number 6 in qualifying. But he's joined by Matthew Giminet and Dane Cameron. That's a sack lineup as well.
And if you go back, Matthew won in the plaid Porsche last year, the FAF Porsche in GT Daytona. So he gets a promotion here as a Porsche factory driver to the hypercar program. And you got Nick Tandy, of course. We know he loves NASCAR. He wants to make a NASCAR appearance. Or Earl Bamber is also, I think Earl Bamber, his teammate, New Zealand driver, got a 1 or 2 off race for Richard Childress Racing in an Xfinity car. And you also have Dane Cameron that we mentioned. Dane has got a championship with Juan Pablo Montoya a couple years ago in the Acura Penske. So Penske took the last year off to develop this new car to help test it, and now they're locked and loaded with some familiar faces, such as Dane Cameron, and they're going to win a race or two this year, and definitely lead laps in the Rolex next weekend.
Yeah, and then the 7 car is Matt Campbell, Felipe Nasser, and Michael Christensen. I know this is technically the number 2 car, but I feel like this car, just with Felipe Nasser behind the wheel, could be a threat to win this race for Penske. And this car has the most testing time out of anybody. So if there's anybody that knows what's going to happen if something goes wrong in the twice round clock challenge, it's definitely this Penske Porsche team.
And they've actually done a 36-hour race a test, Alex, at Sebring. The Penske team. And I know the BMW Rahal Letterman Lanigan team attempted a 24-hour test at Sebring, but aborted it because of issues with the new car. So they were never able to complete one. Acura never even got a chance to attempt a 24-hour test. They kind of planned on it, but they never actually got it done. And Cadillac.
Well, they wrecked both their cars at Road Atlanta in the Petite test last year as well.
Yes, good tidbit on that. Yes, that definitely set the program back, I'm sure, with the supply chain issues everybody's been mentioning. And I'm not sure if Cadillac got a full 24-hour test in or not. I need to look that up, Alex.
I haven't heard anything about it. I would assume, since I haven't heard, that they did, but it wasn't productive.
Okay.
Because you don't hear anything negative. I'm just assuming that it just happened.
Right, and they got the benefit of 2 teams, Action Express and Ganassi, just like Acura does. But Ganassi's got 2 cars, so they got the benefit of sharing information there. And they do have a lot of mileage, whether they got a full 24-hour test in or not. They still have quite a bit of mileage, and so we're gonna get this. We're gonna get to see exactly how sorted out they are for next weekend.
Yeah, well, that is basically everything you need to know about most of the guys and gals racing in the 61 entries for this 61st Rolex 24. Twice around the clock. They'll get the white flag within the last minute, and we'll probably see anywhere between 600 and 900 laps, depending on safety cars and stuff like that. So
I'm looking at the entry list, Alex. I'll point out a few cars that I feel are interesting that we just might have skipped over. Because you do have so many cars, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Satilla, the Ferraris, Satilla Racing, they won Sebring last year. They've ran in the WEC before. They've ran in the Rolex, even in LMP2 Dallara, if you remember, a year or two ago. But Satilla Racing, they have a brand new Ferrari ready to go. Antonio Fuoco, Alessandro Balzan, a lot of miles in Ferraris. Giorgio Sharon-Giotto, Italian. All 4 drivers are Italian, and they won Sebring in a pretty commanding fashion in GT Daytona last year. So we're going to get to see how they do together in the Rolex. I'm going to keep an eye on them. Let's see what else they got in here. AF Corsa, another Ferrari team in GT Daytona, well-known name. Francisco Castellecci, he's an Italian, a silver-rated driver. Luis Perez Compact, their bronze, and Miguel Molina, who's arguably one of the fastest Ferrari drivers in the world. They're going to be in the hunt. There's just so many of them. Wright Motorsports, a Porsche team that's got a lot of experience, that I keep on reiterating that they feel that they're down on BOP. So those are just some of the teams that, I could take a look at and see. And of course, your Sun One Energy Mercedes, they if you remember, Alex, the Rolex IMSA, they initially announced a 60 car entry, and they added in that Sun One Energy Mercedes later on in the year. So
right next to them, the 77 Volt car with Windward Racing, or not Windward, Wright Motorsports, my bad. That's another one of those Porsches. Maybe not too threatening from the driver's standpoint, but it's definitely one of the brightest cars on track, and has been a lot of focus for images coming from fans on Instagram and Twitter and whatnot over the course of the Roar testing.
Yeah,
so that's a very pretty car.
And the Iron Dames, the Iron Lynx, I've seen, like, touching on that, I've seen a lot of pictures of them too, by being how bright they are. So love the day glow colors, the bright neon colors.
Yeah, well,
and last but not least, I want to mention the Lexus team. They have a Pro and a GT Daytona car, very experienced squad, and they're ready to win. I mean, they're ready to win right now. They were also up in the top 3, top 5 in some of the Roar test results, and they have a very unchanged lineup in each car.
And that's a fully committed. That's a fully committed program too.
Oh, when all year.
GT Daytona doesn't race and the pros race, they put their number 14 car into those races. When the GT Daytona pros don't race, but the GT Daytonas do, they put the pro car in the Daytona race. So that's a fully committed team over there with Lexus, and that's a Toyota team. So maybe Toyota Gazoo Racing comes over as a Lexus brand in hypercar.
That's interesting for next year if Lexus or Toyota, if they paid the sanctioning fee to IMSA, which was, like I said, rumored to be $1 million. Because I could see Toyota running the Rolex next year and going against all these Cadillacs and Porsches, and man, that's great. So it
would be perfect to watch them say, all right, well, we're going to come beat you American a-holes on your own, turf.
Yeah,
that would be awesome.
And we're going to get to see it at Sebring real soon in a couple months.
Yeah, I can't wait. This new golden era of sports car racing is phenomenal. It's around the world of motorsports as well. We've got the new Formula One cars and the new NASCARs last year. The new Indy cars potentially coming in 2024. The new supercars this year.
They make it look easy, don't they? All these motorsport sanctioning bodies, they're making it look easy right now, but we know it's not easy. It takes years of planning and development and deals and sponsorship and contract negotiations. I mean, it is not simple to get in, and we're living definitely in a golden era, as a lot of people are saying, especially for IMSA, especially for WAC WEC. And there's something to be seen for every NASCAR, Formula One, like you touched on, Alex, is something for everybody. So
if you're a racing fan, I know most of our guys watch NASCAR. Tune in this weekend. It's round the clock on Peacock. They're going to have CNBC. They're going to have NBC and USA all showing various parts of the race. If you don't live in the U.S. or you can make yourself not live in the U.S., wink, wink, nod, nod, grab yourself a VPN, wink, wink, nod, nod, and go watch on IMSA TV, commercial free, with the Radio Le Mans guys. Jeremy Shaw and them have way better broadcasting than NBC ever could. So this is the time to get into sports car racing if you are looking to branch out your motorsports fan.
That's right, Alex. That's right. And this race coming up here this weekend is a prime example. And just keep an eye on, keep it 24 hours on the Peacock channel. It's going to be pretty exciting. I remember in the early Speed Vision days, the first time they did the whole race on Speed Vision was pretty exciting, pretty crazy to even think. they try to
It-
broadcast something for 24
It's wild as a kid having to watch on Speed Channel and stuff with commercials and not being able to see the whole entire race because you got to stop for Supercross or some other show that they're putting on, and now you can just hop on your computer and watch 24 hours straight, no interruptions. I'm looking forward to it this weekend. We're gonna be making some wings for the start of the show, making some sheep meat, having some
Get
good,
your dad in
nice,
there. Yeah, he's get him some
tacos and
IMSA.
everything.
He needs some
So,
little more
yeah.
IMSA action. So get him in
Yeah.
there, and he'll watch too.
Yeah, and you guys are going to be in the RV, so y'all be right there at the track. I'm sure y'all
feel
got
free
a
to
bunch.
buzz in and feel free to buzz in, and I'll see if I can get you some footage on where we're at. We're right outside of turn 6, so the cars are entering back onto NASCAR track, turn 1.
That
right?
is prime location in my opinion. So I remember when we went down for 2020, we walked all over the racetrack, and being in the infield was really cool, just being right beside the action. I think being able to go out into the stands and watch the entire racetrack at once is something you can't get anywhere else in road course racing. So
no, you
if
can
you
see the
haven't
whole
gone
track.
to the Rolex, make a trip.
That's right.
All right. Well, it's been fun, Kyle. I really appreciate you coming in and helping me break down this
anytime,
Rolex
Alex.
field.
Anytime. I wish we had more time.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, we'll be here all night talking about every entry. There's a storyline behind every entry, all 61 of them, and then some. And then each driver in each car. There's 3 to 4 drivers per car. Well over 100 drivers racing this weekend.
And then we also got to hear your story. A little bit about
I
you.
appreciate you guys asking about that. And I remember some days in middle school, I would literally sneak out of class, take the local bus, city bus down to the Daytona Speedway, catch Bud Shootout practice, catch ARCA qualifying, catch Goody's Dash Series qualifying, and make my way back home. And I'll be home for dinner. And my parents never knew a thing.
Well, they know now. So
yeah, they know now. And so that sticks with me, and I want to change it for a thing. That's right.
All right. Well, like I said, we appreciate you having it. Any plugs you want to give before we call it a night?
Yeah, I just want to say, thanks to you and your dad, and you guys have been great. Your dad's love for dirt racing has rubbed off on me, and all you other fans that are out there, just keep on keeping on. Keep an eye on these. There's a lot of really cool things happening right now in racing, and we're glad to be able to witness it. And just keep your attention on IMSA and NASCAR and the WEC and European Le Mans Series and iRacing, and we're living in some good times right now, Alex. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you coming on. As always, guys, you can follow us on all our socials at FanFuel MSM right there on the screen. Capital F, capital F, capital MSM. Lowercase on TikTok and Instagram. And we do have TikToks coming on. And that that will be coming back now that I'm not hoarse like I have been the last couple of weeks. So we'll see you next week. And we appreciate you stopping in tonight. All right. Bye.